The night my sister sent me down the basement stairs, I had a clean towel in one hand and the smell of detergent still on my fingers. It was late, close to 10. The house was quiet in that familiar way old houses get after everyone has settled in. The refrigerator hummed upstairs. A floorboard clicked somewhere above me. I had just opened the basement door when my sister said, very evenly, "Maybe if you stopped acting superior for 5 minutes, people would actually want you here." I turned back toward her. I remember doing that more than anything. Not angry, just tired. I said, "Lena, give me back what you took from my room." She was standing in the hallway light with one hand half inside the pocket of her sweatshirt. For a second, she did not move. Then she gave me a look I had seen before. Flat, cold, almost settled. A few hours later, an emergency room doctor would hold an X-ray up to the light and go very still. But at that moment, all I felt was her hand against me and the hard edge of the step beneath my shoulder. By the time I stopped moving, I was on my back at the bottom of the stairs with a metallic taste in my mouth and a sharp pain running through my side every time I tried to breathe. Above me, Lena stood with both arms still slightly out, as if even she had not expected the force of it. Then I heard my parents coming fast across the kitchen floor. My mother reached the doorway first. "What happened?" Her voice was sharp, but she was looking at my sister, not me. "She slipped," Lena said quickly. "She's always rushing around." I told her to slow down. I tried to sit up. Pain moved through my ribs so hard it blurred the room for a second. "She pushed me," I said, though it came out thin and uneven. My father was already coming down the stairs. "Not now, Claire." That was the phrase he used when he wanted reality arranged before anyone else could touch it. Not now. Meaning not here. Not in front of people. Not in a way that could stain the family. My name is Claire Dawson. I was 25 then, finishing a demanding year of my internal medicine residency and still living at my parents' house outside Richmond because it was the only way I could make the numbers work. My younger sister, Lena, was 27 and had moved back 6 months earlier after another collapsed semester, another abandoned plan, another version of her life that had somehow become everyone else's problem. When we were children, her temper had been called sensitivity. In high school, it became stress. By the time we were adults, it had turned into something no one in the house would name directly. Objects thrown. Doors slammed into me by accident. Money missing. My own bedroom disturbed in small, unmistakable ways. Each incident came with an explanation already prepared for me. I was careless. I was overworked. I was imagining the pattern. My mother crouched beside me and put a hand near my shoulder without quite touching it. "Can you breathe?" "Not well," I said. The basement smelled faintly of dust and fabric softener. The concrete floor was cold through my clothes. Somewhere upstairs, the dryer buzzed to signal the end of a cycle. Everything ordinary stayed ordinary, even while I lay there trying not to gasp. "I think she needs the hospital," my mother said. My father exhaled through his nose. "Let's not overreact." That, too, was familiar. I had a memory then, not dramatic, just clear. A bathroom mirror 3 years earlier. A bruise at my hairline after Lena had thrown a hardcover textbook across the room. My mother standing behind me saying, "Put some ice on it and please don't start with her tonight." I should say this plainly. By then I already knew how to read an injury. I knew what fractured ribs felt like. I knew what it meant when pain sharpened with each breath and spread under the arm. But knowledge is strange inside a family. It does not always turn into action. My mother helped me sit up. I could not stop the sound that came out of me. That finally changed something in her face. My father looked at me for a long moment, calculating. Then he said, "Fine, we'll take her in." But Claire listened carefully. I looked up at him. "You missed a step carrying laundry." That's all this was. Lena was still standing above us in the hallway light. Not crying. Not apologizing. Just watching. For years, that look had worked on me. It carried a simple message. No one is going to choose your version over mine. My father bent slightly closer. "Do you understand?" I did understand. I understood the script, the sequence, the tone I was expected to use. I understood that by morning the story would be fixed in place so neatly that even I might begin to doubt what had happened. That was how it always worked. But something had shifted, though I could not have explained it yet. Maybe it was the pain. Maybe it was the exhaustion of repeating the same lie in different forms. Maybe it was the quiet, unsettling way Lena had not even bothered to deny it properly. My mother and father got me to the car without another word. The seatbelt pressed against my side so hard I had to hold it away from my ribs with one hand during the drive. Streetlights moved across the windshield in long pale bands. No one turned on the radio. Lena did not come with us. Halfway to the hospital, my father repeated the story once, then again, as if rehearsal could make it true. I looked out the window at the empty intersections and dark storefronts, and for the first time in years, I did not answer right away. Then I waited. The emergency department was busy in the steady, ordinary way hospitals often are at night. Wheels moving over tile. Low voices at the desk. A television in the waiting area turned down so far that no one could really follow it. My father checked us in before I could speak, and when the triage nurse asked what happened, he answered for me. She fell down the basement stairs carrying laundry. The nurse looked at me as she typed. I gave a small nod because breathing hurt and because habits like that do not disappear in one evening. They put me in a chair near the wall to wait for imaging. My mother sat beside me with both hands wrapped around her purse. My father stood. He always stood in waiting rooms, as if sitting might suggest uncertainty. Every few minutes, he leaned down and repeated some version of the same sentence. Keep it simple. Don't make this bigger than it is. You know how these things sound. I kept my eyes on the floor tiles, white with thin gray lines. One of them was cracked near the leg of the chair beside mine. I remember noticing that and thinking how strange it was that the world could still offer tiny details when your ribs felt split open. A nurse came to bring me back. My father started to rise with us. Just the patient, she said. It's fine, he replied. I'm her father. She did not argue. She only said, the doctor will speak with her first. That slight delay mattered more than I realized. The exam room was cool and bright. Paper crinkled under me as I sat on the edge of the bed, trying not to lean too far in either direction. A few minutes later, the attending physician came in. She was in her 40s, dark hair pulled back, badge turned partly sideways on her coat. Her name was Dr. Natalie Ruiz. She greeted me first, not the chart, not the doorway, not the family she had clearly already noticed outside. What's going on tonight, Claire? I gave her the same line. I fell down the stairs. She asked where I hit first, which side took the weight, whether I lost consciousness, whether anyone saw it happen. Her voice stayed even, almost quiet, nothing dramatic. But by the third question, I could hear the gap between what I was saying and what made sense. Then she asked, do you live with anyone? My parents. And my sister. She nodded once and listened to my lungs. Each breath made me tense. Deep breath for me. I tried. That's enough, she said. When she gently turned my left arm to look at the bruising near the wrist, her expression changed very slightly. Not shock. Recognition. She stepped back and opened the door. My parents were immediately visible in the hallway. I'd like a few minutes alone with Claire, she said. My father answered before my mother could. That won't be necessary. Dr. Ruiz rested one hand on the chart. It is, actually. Standard trauma assessment. It was a household fall. She met his eyes without raising her voice. And I'm still going to examine her alone. There was a pause. My mother looked tired. My father looked offended. But they stepped back. When the door closed again, the room seemed to settle. Dr. Ruiz pulled the stool closer and sat down so that we were at the same height. You can keep the story you gave me, she said, but I need you to know something first. I looked at her. I've done this a long time. Falls leave one kind of pattern. Being grabbed before impact leaves another. I said nothing. She continued in that same steady tone. The bruising on your forearm looks like fingers. Not a railing. Not a step. Fingers. My throat tightened before my eyes did. I hated that. I hated crying in front of strangers. It felt like surrender. So I looked at the sink instead. Stainless steel. Water spots near the drain. I'm ordering x-rays, she said. Possibly a CT, depending on what I see. After that, I'm going to ask you again. I nodded once. Imaging took time. A technician wheeled me down a long hallway that smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm plastic. In radiology, the room was dim except for the equipment screen. I followed instructions the way I had given them to patients myself during rotations. Turn slightly. Hold still. Small breath. Stop. It struck me then how easy it was to become two people at once. The physician who understood process. The daughter who had spent years stepping around it. Back in the exam room, I sat alone for almost 20 minutes. No phone. No bag. Just the thin blanket over my knees and the ache in my side growing more exact. In the hallway, I could hear my father once, low and irritated, asking someone how much longer this was going to take. Then I heard something else. Not words at first. Just the clipped, professional tone people use when a situation has shifted from routine to formal. Dr. Ruiz came back in with the images. She set them on the screen and stood still for a moment before speaking. "Claire," she said, "I need to ask you one more time what happened on those stairs." I looked at the lighted films, at the clean pale line of one fracture and the shadow of another older injury near my wrist, and for the first time that night I understood that the room had changed sides. Then I took a breath as carefully as I could and opened my mouth. I did not tell the whole story at once. What came out first was simple. My sister pushed me. Dr. Ruiz gave a small nod, as if she had been waiting for me to arrive at a fact rather than forcing me toward one. "Thank you," she said. "Start with tonight." So I did. I told her about the money missing from my desk drawer. About seeing Lena come out of my room with that familiar look on her face, already annoyed at being noticed. About following her into the hallway. About saying, quietly, that I wanted it back. About the way she had stepped closer instead of farther away. I did not dress it up. I did not try to sound brave. I just said what happened in the order it happened. When I finished, Dr. Ruiz turned to the x-rays. "You have at least 2 fractured ribs on the left side," she said. "Possibly a third. There's also a wrist injury I want orthopedics to look at." Then she pointed to a faint healed line near the radius. This did not happen tonight. I stared at the image. Even with my training, even standing where I had stood in rooms like this for other people, it felt unreal seeing my own body turned into evidence. "When was the last time you injured this arm?" she asked. I answered too quickly. "I'm not sure." She waited. I looked again. "A few months ago," I said. "Maybe 4. She threw something at me. I thought it was just a bad sprain. Dr. Ruiz did not react with surprise. She only reached for the phone on the wall and said, "I'm going to explain what happens next." That mattered. The explanation. Not comfort exactly. Order. She spoke clearly, like someone outlining a protocol. "Step 1, I document what you told me and what I see." She picked up the chart and wrote while she talked. "Step 2, I request a social work consult and notify hospital security that there is a family violence concern." I felt my chest tighten at the phrase family violence. It sounded too official for the life I had been living, too clean and accurate all at once. Step 3, because these injuries suggest an ongoing pattern, I make a mandatory report. I looked up at her. "To the police? To protective services for vulnerable adults and to law enforcement, yes, depending on the details." She paused. "You are an adult, so no one is taking control away from you. But I am not free to ignore a documented pattern of assault." Outside, I could hear my father's voice again. He was speaking too calmly now, which usually meant he was angry enough to become polished. I said, "He's going to say I'm unstable. Overworked. Exhausted." "Maybe," Dr. Ruiz said. "That doesn't change the films." That was the first moment the balance shifted. Not emotionally. Practically. For years, everything in that house had depended on tone. On who sounded reasonable. On who got their version in first. Lena cried at the right times. My father spoke in complete, measured sentences. My mother looked tired and quietly loyal to whoever was strongest in the room. I had spent so long trying not to make trouble that I had mistaken silence for safety. But X-rays did not care who sounded calm. Documentation did not care who was favored. A chart did not rearrange itself to protect a family name. Dr. Ruiz stepped out briefly. When she returned, a hospital social worker came with her, followed by a security officer who remained outside the room. The social worker introduced herself as Dana Hall and took the chair near the door. She had a legal pad, a badge, and the kind of expression that told me she had seen worse things handled more quietly. "I'm going to ask a few questions," she said. "Some may feel repetitive." "That's because details matter." They did matter. I knew that from medicine. Timing, mechanism, history, prior incidents. Who was present? What was said? Whether care had been delayed. I had explained all of this to patients before. Now it was being built around me carefully, one fact at a time. Dana asked whether tonight was the first time my sister had hurt me. "No, how long has it been happening?" I looked at my hands. Years. But worse in the last 6 months. "Any previous medical care related to these incidents?" "Yes," I said, but always explained as accidents. By whom? My parents. And sometimes by me. She wrote that down without comment. Then she asked the question I had spent years answering badly. "Why did you stay?" Normally, I would have said what people expect. Money, training, family pressure, housing costs. All of that was true. But sitting there in that bright room with my ribs lit up on a screen, I found a more honest version. "Because they trained me to doubt my own threshold," I said. "And because every incident was made to seem small right after it happened." Dana nodded once and wrote that down too. A resident from orthopedics came in next, then a nurse with medication, then someone from security asking whether I wanted my family removed from the unit. The room became a place of process. Consent forms, notes, timelines, small decisions that built a wall between me and the story my father had been rehearsing in the waiting area. At one point, my mother tried to come in. I heard her voice through the door. "I just want to see my daughter." The security officer answered, "Not right now, ma'am." I thought that would break me, hearing her outside and not letting her in. Instead, I felt something steadier than relief. Distance. Dana asked whether I had a safe place to go if I was discharged the next day. "Yes," I said, thinking of my friend Nora from residency. She had told me twice that month, without pressing, that her guest room was available whenever I wanted quiet. At the time, I had treated it like kindness in the abstract. Now it became an address. A plan. Dana wrote it down. Then Dr. Ruiz returned with a CT report. "There's something else," she said. She turned the screen slightly toward me and pointed with the capped end of a pen. "This suggests an older, untreated head injury. Not from tonight." I knew the moment before she asked. "Have you had any concussion symptoms in the last year?" she said. I closed my eyes for a second. 3 months earlier, Lena had thrown a heavy anatomy review book at me because I refused to lend her my car. It hit near my temple. I had vomited once that night and then slept for 11 hours because my mother said rest was better than making a scene in the emergency room. When I told them that, the room went completely still. No one gasped. No one offered sympathy too quickly. They just documented it. That silence did more for me than comfort would have. A detective was on the way, Dana said. Security had already noted my father's behavior in the hallway. The hospital could help arrange transport to a safe location when I was discharged. My family would not be allowed to take me home without my consent. I lay back carefully against the raised bed and looked at the ceiling tiles. It occurred to me then that my family had spent years teaching me one central rule: keep everything inside the house. The hospital was built on the opposite rule: record it, timestamp it, verify it, hand it to the next person in the chain. Then I waited. The detective arrived a little after midnight. By then, the pain medication had taken the sharpest edge off my ribs, but everything still felt precise. The room, the clock, the voices outside the door. I had the strange clarity that sometimes comes after a long strain, when your body is tired, but your mind has finally stopped negotiating with facts. Her name was Detective Elise Harper. She wore plain clothes under a dark coat and carried a notebook that looked used, not theatrical. She introduced herself, asked whether I was comfortable enough to talk, and waited for my answer instead of deciding for me. That alone felt unfamiliar. "Yes," I said. She took the chair Dana had been using and placed a small recorder on the tray table. "I'm going to ask you to go slowly," she said. "Not because I doubt you. Because sequence matters." I gave a small nod. She switched the recorder on. "Please state your full name." I did. And tell me what happened tonight. So I told it again. Not the way my father would have told it. Not the shortened version I had practiced for years. The real one. Money missing from my desk. Lena leaving my room. The hallway. The stairs. Her hand against my shoulder and chest. The fall. What my parents said when they came down. What my father instructed me to repeat in the car. Detective Harper did not interrupt much. When she did, it was only to fix a point in place. About what time? Which side of your body took impact? Who said that first? Had money gone missing before? By the fourth or fifth clarification, I understood something important. She was not gathering emotion. She was building a structure. After she finished with tonight, she asked about prior incidents. I answered more cleanly this time than I had with Dana. There is a certain relief in learning that order can do what distress never could. I gave dates when I could, approximate months when I could not. The textbook to the head. The hard shove into a door frame the winter before. The missing cash. The bruises on my arms. The time Lena locked me out after a night shift and my father told me to stop upsetting her because she was already fragile. Detective Harper wrote everything down. Then she asked, "Do you have anything that might support a pattern?" Messages. Photos. Notes. Bank activity. I looked at her, and that was the moment another small truth surfaced. I did. Not because I had planned some dramatic reveal. Not because I had been secretly building a case. More because years of living inside confusion had made me cling to fragments. Screenshots I never explained. Photos of bruises I took and then hid in a locked folder. A note in my phone where I sometimes typed dates and one-line summaries after incidents because I had begun, privately, to fear how easy it was to be talked out of my own memory. I said, "My phone is in my coat pocket. My parents may still have the coat." Dana stood up immediately. "I'll get it from security. Your belongings were logged separately." While she was gone, Detective Harper folded one hand over the other and said, "This is where you can help yourself most. We stay with what can be verified." That suited me. By the time Dana returned, my coat and phone were in a clear hospital property bag. The battery was low, but it turned on. My passcode worked on the second try because my hands were shaking. I opened the hidden album first. Bruises on my forearm from late January. A yellowing mark along my shoulder from the month before that. The side of my face reflected in a bathroom mirror, one eye slightly swollen, which I had taken after the textbook incident, but never shown anyone. Detective Harper asked before each image, "Can you identify when this was taken?" I did my best. Then I opened the Notes app. There were more entries than I remembered. Not long paragraphs. Just pieces. March 3rd, Lena took $80 from my drawer. Denied it. Dad said let it go. December 18th, bruised left wrist. She grabbed me when I wouldn't give her my card. January 27th, door to face. Mom said it was an accident. I handed the phone to Detective Harper and watched her read. She did not soften her expression. She did not harden it either. She just became more certain. "These are useful," she said, "especially with the imaging and your statement." My father knocked once, then opened the door halfway before security stopped him. He was wearing the same coat he had left home in, but his tie was gone and the top button of his shirt was undone. It made him look less powerful, which I think irritated him more than being excluded. "Claire," he said, as if the officer were not there, "you need to stop this now." I turned my head and looked at him. Really looked. For most of my life his confidence had worked like weather. It filled a room before he did. But here, under fluorescent lights, with hospital staff moving behind him and a detective taking notes at my bedside, he looked like what he was. A man trying to get control of a process that no longer belonged to him. I said, "Please close the door." He stared at me. Then he said, quieter, "You don't understand what this will do." That sentence had shaped whole years of my life. Not what this did to me. What this would do. To the family. To his reputation. To the version of events he preferred. I kept my voice level. I understand exactly what it already did. There was no speech after that. No release. No performance. He began to say my name again, but Detective Harper stood, crossed to the door, and told him with perfect calm that if he interfered with an active statement again, she would document it accordingly. He stepped back. The door closed. I let out one careful breath and rested my head against the pillow. That was the strategic shift, though I did not name it that way at the time. Until then, I had still been reacting, answering, enduring, clarifying. But sometime between the hidden photo folder and my father's face at the door, I understood that this could not stay emotional if it was going to stay true. So I thought about it the only way I knew how. Step 1. Secure somewhere safe to sleep. Step 2. Preserve every piece of evidence before anyone could reach it. Step 3. Do not return to the house, not even for clothes, without an officer present. Step 4. Notify my residency program before my family did. Step 5. Keep speaking in facts. Once I had those steps in mind, my breathing settled. I texted Nora from my phone while Detective Harper finished her notes. Can I still use your spare room? It's urgent. She replied less than a minute later. Yes. No questions tonight. Just send me when. I nearly cried at that, but I did not. I put the phone face down for a moment and let the relief pass through me quietly. Then I sent one more message, this time to the chief resident. I had an emergency at home and am in the hospital. I'm safe. There may be outside contact from family. I'll explain tomorrow. That message mattered. Not because I owed anyone details, because I knew how quickly influential families can pre-frame a story when careers are involved. My father had connections at the hospital board level, enough to make me cautious. I was done arriving second to my own account. Detective Harper asked one final question before ending the recording. Do you want to pursue charges if the evidence supports them? I looked at the X-ray screen, then at my phone, then at the closed door. Yes, I said. And I want the record to reflect that this did not begin tonight. She clicked the recorder off. In the hallway, voices moved past in low currents. The hospital had entered that late-hour quiet where everything important still happens, only more softly. Dana began arranging discharge planning for the next day. Security updated the access restrictions on my room. Dr. Ruiz came back once to check my pain and told me, with the same steady tone she had used from the beginning, that the right people now had the right information. For years, silence in my family had been treated as loyalty. That night, I started using it differently. Not to protect them, to think. Then I waited. I was discharged the next afternoon with taped ribs, a wrist brace, a folder of instructions, and an officer assigned to meet me at my parents' house while I collected what I needed. The drive there was quiet. Detective Harper had arranged it so I would not arrive alone, and for that I was grateful. Once a process is in motion, the practical details begin to matter more than emotion. Keys, medications, identification, work badge, laptop, a few days of clothes, charging cables. Small things, but small things decide whether you are leaving or only saying you are. Officer Mallory parked at the curb and turned off the engine. We'll keep this simple, she said. You go in, gather essentials, and come back out. If anyone interferes, I handle it. That suited me. The house looked exactly the same as it had every other day of my adult life. White shutters, 2 trimmed hedges, the brass knocker my mother polished before holidays. Looking at it from the street, no one would have guessed how much effort it had taken to keep the inside of it looking normal. My father opened the door before I reached it. He must have been watching from the front window. He looked composed again. Fresh shirt. Shaved. The kind of control he preferred to wear when things were serious. Behind him, my mother stood in the hallway with both hands clasped together. Lena was not visible. My father's eyes moved past me to the officer, then back. This is unnecessary. I answered before he could build momentum. I'm here for my things. My voice surprised even me. It was not strong in a dramatic way. It was simply settled. He stepped aside, though only just enough. You've made a terrible mistake. Officer Mallory remained on the porch, but within sight of the doorway. Ms. Dawson has the right to retrieve her belongings without interference. I walked in. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and coffee. Sunlight was falling across the stairs in thin stripes from the foyer window. It was the same staircase, the same polished banister, the same framed family photos running up the wall. In most of them, Lena was leaning toward the center of the frame, and I was standing slightly apart. I noticed that and then moved on. My mother followed me halfway to the stairs. "Claire," she said softly, "please don't do this like this." I turned and looked at her. There was a time when that tone would have undone me. Not because it was cruel, because it was tired. Tiredness can make surrender feel like kindness. I said, "This is the first time anything has been done correctly." She flinched, but she did not argue. In my room, I took out a duffel bag and started with the obvious things. Underclothes, 2 pairs of scrubs, toiletries, prescription bottle, laptop charger, my residency ID, the framed photograph of me and Nora at graduation. I did not pack sentimentally. I packed for function. Then I opened the desk drawer. The cash envelope was there. It was thinner than it should have been, which almost made me laugh from the predictability of it. I counted quickly. $200 missing. I took a photo, then another of the drawer itself. Then I placed the envelope in my bag. That was when my father appeared in the doorway. He did not raise his voice. He rarely did when other people were close enough to hear. If you wanted money, you could have asked. I zipped the side pocket of the duffel. It was mine. His jaw moved once. "Your sister has been unwell." I turned to face him fully. There, finally, was the controlled setting I had needed. Daylight. A witness outside. My bag half packed. My body still bruised enough that the facts were visible without explanation. "I'm going to say this once," I told him. "Do not describe theft as illness. Do not describe violence as stress. And do not ask me to help you tidy this up." He stared at me as if I had spoken a language he did not approve of. Then he said, very carefully, "You are risking your future over a family dispute." "No," I said. "I was risking my future by staying." He took one step into the room. "I have spent years protecting this family." I looked at him for a moment and realized that he believed that, or had taught himself to. "From what?" I asked. "Consequences." He did not answer. That silence told the truth more cleanly than anything else in the room. My mother appeared behind him then, and for a second the old arrangement was visible again, him at the front, her slightly behind, both of them hoping tone could restore order. But order had changed meaning for me. It was no longer the absence of conflict. It was the presence of record. "I wish you had told us things were this bad," my mother said. I kept my hands on the bag so they would not shake. I did. The words landed harder than I expected. Harder on her, too. She looked down. I did not add examples. I did not list dates. I did not revisit every moment she had turned away from the obvious. Confrontation is often ruined by over-explaining. I had learned enough by then to let the sentence stand. From somewhere down the hall came the sound of a door opening. Then Lena's voice. "Are the police still here?" She came into view wearing leggings and one of my old sweatshirts, which I recognized immediately. For years, that kind of thing had seemed too petty to name. Now it felt like part of the same system. Boundary after boundary crossed, and then minimized until I no longer trusted my own sense of proportion. When she saw me packing, she stopped. For the first time in years, she looked uncertain. "Claire," she said, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I went back to folding a sweater. She took that as permission to continue. "You know how things get. You push, and I looked up. That was all it took. No anger. Just eye contact." She stopped mid-sentence. I said, "Do not explain my injuries to me." My father started to speak, but Officer Mallory's voice carried clearly from the hallway. "Everything all right in there?" "Yes," I answered. "But I'm almost done." Lena's face changed then, not into remorse exactly, but into the expression of someone realizing the old route was closed. No tears came. No sudden collapse. She was searching, I think, for the version of herself that usually worked best in a room and could not find it in time. "I said I was sorry," she murmured. "I heard you," I said. "That doesn't change the record." Again, no speech. No grand declaration. Just a boundary with a legal shape to it. I took my passport from the drawer under the bed, checked that my bank cards were still in my wallet, and unplugged the external hard drive from my desk. Then I paused and scanned the room one last time, not sentimentally, just methodically. Things I needed. Things I could replace. Things I should leave untouched. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Nora. Room is ready. Fresh sheets on the bed. Take your time. I read it once and put the phone away. When I stepped back into the hallway with the bag over one shoulder, my mother was holding the banister as if she needed it. Will you tell us where you're staying? She asked. No, her face tightened. Claire, we're still your parents. I adjusted the bag carefully so it would not press against my ribs. That title doesn't erase what you permitted. No one answered that. At the front door, my father made one final attempt, though his tone had changed. Less authority now. More negotiation. If this goes any further, there will be hearings, records, questions. People will talk. I put one hand on the doorknob. It already went further, I said. You just kept calling it private. Then I opened the door. Officer Mallory stepped aside to let me pass. The air outside was cool and clean. I had not realized until that moment how stale the house had felt, even with windows open. As I walked to the car, I did not look back. Halfway down the street, my phone rang. Detective Harper. I answered. We finished the preliminary review, she said. There's enough to move this forward formally. I'll need you downtown tomorrow morning to go over the statement packet and supporting materials. I looked out through the windshield at a line of bare trees moving past. All right, I said. There's one more thing, she added. Your father has already called someone at the hospital board level. It won't change the case, but it confirms what you told us about influence. We documented the contact. That did not shock me. It clarified things. The system had finally met the family. And tomorrow, everything would start going on paper. The next morning, I went downtown with my wrist brace under the cuff of my coat and a folder in my bag that felt heavier than paper should. The detective bureau was on the third floor of a county building that smelled faintly of copier toner and old heat. Nothing dramatic about it. Fluorescent lights. Scuffed tile. A receptionist behind glass. That was part of what studied me. Real consequences rarely arrive with music or speeches. They arrive in forms, signatures, and rooms where people ask you to confirm dates. Detective Harper met me in a small interview room with a metal table, 2 chairs, and a digital recorder already set out in the center. She had printed my statement, along with copies of the hospital imaging summary, the photographs from my phone, and stills from a hallway security camera at the hospital showing my father trying to force access to my room after he had been told not to. Before we begin, she said, sliding the papers into order, I want you to know where this stands. I sat down carefully. My ribs still made themselves known every time I shifted. She continued in the same calm tone she had used from the beginning. The hospital report is strong. The imaging establishes recent injury and a pattern consistent with prior trauma. Your notes and photographs support continuity. The staff statements support interference and attempted control after the fact. We also have enough to seek your sister's phone records in relation to the financial theft if we need them. I looked down at the packet. Months earlier, even a single page like that would have terrified me. Now I found it clarifying. There is relief in seeing a life translated into plain sequence. Will they be charged? I asked. Detective Harper did not rush the answer. Your sister, very likely. Assault resulting in bodily injury, and, depending on the financial review, possibly theft-related charges as well. Your parents are more complicated, but the failure to seek care in prior incidents, the pattern of concealment, and documented attempts to shape your statement matter. The prosecutor will review all of it. Then she turned the packet toward me. We went page by page. Date of incident. Address. Names. Injury descriptions. Prior episodes. Relevant witnesses. Medical findings. My initial false statement in triad, followed by corrected disclosure in private examination. I appreciated that it was included. It mattered that the record showed how these situations actually happen. People under pressure often lie first. Systems worth anything know that and keep going. At the end, I signed. Not with trembling hands this time. Just a pen, a line, my name. Then I waited while she made a copy for me. By the afternoon, the process had started moving in visible ways. Lena was served first. I know this not because I saw it, but because my mother left me a voicemail at 2:14 p.m. Her voice was shaky and formal, as if she did not know which version of herself to use anymore. "Claire, the police came to the house. They spoke to Lena in the living room. Your father is trying to reach someone. Please call me. Please." I listened to it once, then saved it without responding. About 40 minutes later, Nora set a mug of tea near my elbow at her kitchen table and asked, "Do you want me to sit with you while you go through the rest?" I nodded. The tea smelled like chamomile and orange peel. Outside, someone was mowing a lawn 2 houses over. It was an ordinary afternoon in a borrowed kitchen, and because it was ordinary, I think I will always remember it. I opened the next voicemail. This one was from my father. His message was measured. Too measured. "Claire, this has gone beyond what is appropriate. Your sister is being treated like a criminal over a domestic misunderstanding. I am asking you, one last time, to reconsider before permanent damage is done." I wrote the time down on a legal pad Nora handed me. That was another change. I had stopped hearing words only as pressure. I was hearing them as record. By early evening, Detective Harper called again. "Your father contacted a board member connected to the hospital and suggested the treating physician had overstepped. The board member reported it rather than engaging. We obtained a note of that contact." I closed my eyes for a moment. That, more than anything, captured the whole architecture of my family. Injury first. Influence second. Truth only if forced. "Thank you," I said. "It helps your case," she replied. Attempts to interfere usually do. The prosecutor's review took a few weeks. During that time, my world became narrow in a useful way. Morning shifts. Follow-up appointments. Physical healing. Meetings with a therapist the hospital referred me to. Calls with Detective Harper. Short meals at Nora's table. Laundry folded in a quiet house. I had spent so many years living in alertness that routine began to feel almost luxurious. Then the formal notices came. Lena accepted a plea agreement. The charge was reduced from what it might have been if taken to trial, but it still carried weight. Probation, mandatory psychiatric evaluation and treatment compliance, restitution for the documented theft, and a protective order requiring her to stay away from me. The exact terms mattered less to me than the language around them. There, in the paperwork, was a sentence that did not bend for family preference. The defendant caused bodily injury to the victim during an intentional act of force. Intentional. Not stress. Not misunderstanding. Not clumsiness. My parents' outcome came separately and more quietly. The prosecutor did not pursue the broadest version of the case, but there were consequences. They entered agreements tied to obstruction-related conduct and failure to seek appropriate care in prior documented incidents when I had been financially and structurally dependent on the home. Mandatory counseling. Community service. Restrictions around contact with me. It was not cinematic. It was administrative and real, which suited me better. A local paper ran a brief item because my father's name carried some weight in our area and because his position on the Hospital Foundation Advisory Board ended shortly after. The article was only a few paragraphs long. No photos. No sensational wording. But it existed, and that mattered. Nora found it folded on the counter one morning beside the fruit bowl. She looked up at me and asked, "Do you want it moved?" I walked over, read the small print, then set it back down. "No," I said. "It can stay there a minute." It was strange seeing our family reduced to public language. Resigned. Pending review. Protective order. Medical documentation. Stripped of all the softening words we had lived inside for years, the facts looked almost simple. A few days later, the hospital asked whether I would be willing to meet with an internal committee reviewing emergency response protocols in suspected abuse cases. Dr. Ruiz had recommended me, not as a symbol, she said, but as someone who understood both sides of the bed rail. Patient and physician. Silence and process. I agreed. The meeting was held in a conference room with bad coffee and a table too long for the number of people in it. There were administrators, 2 ER physicians, a social worker, and a resident representative. No one performed concern. They asked practical questions. What made disclosure easier? What delayed it? At what point did staff intervention become decisive? What should residents be taught to notice? I answered plainly. Ask privately and early. Don't overvalue the first version of the story. Document behavior in the hallway, not just injury in the room. And if something feels controlled rather than accidental, I said, treat that feeling as clinical information until facts confirm or disprove it. People wrote that down. After the meeting, Dr. Ruiz walked with me toward the elevator. She had changed out of her white coat and was carrying a paper folder under one arm. "You did well," she said. I gave a small smile. That felt less like doing well and more like filing a report. She smiled back. Exactly. That was the resolution, really. Not forgiveness. Not a dramatic scene in a courtroom. Not anyone collapsing under the weight of a speech. Just the steady replacement of a false private order with a real public one. The truth moved through the channels available to it. Imaging, notes, staff statements, dates, calls, signatures, restrictions. And because it moved that way, it held. That evening, when I got back to Nora's house, there was an envelope tucked through the mail slot. My mother's handwriting was on the front. I stood in the kitchen with the envelope in one hand and the quiet of the house around me. I did not open it right away. I left my mother's letter unopened on the kitchen counter until after dinner. Nora had made soup. Nothing complicated. Carrots, white beans, rosemary, a loaf of bread warmed in the oven. We ate at the small round table by the window, and for most of the meal we talked about ordinary things. Her attending physician who still dictated notes like it was 1998. A resident on my service who kept losing his pens. Whether the weather was finally turning. That kind of conversation had become important to me, not as distraction, as proof. Proof that life could return to proportion. That every room did not have to hold a hidden version of events. That a meal could be only a meal. After we cleaned up, I stood at the sink drying the last bowl while Nora wiped down the counter. The kitchen light was warm. A dishwasher hummed softly in the background. On the chair by the back door, my coat was folded neatly with my wrist brace in the pocket. Small order. Visible order. I had started noticing it everywhere. When the dishes were done, Nora touched the envelope once with 2 fingers and said, "No need to read it tonight." "I know," I said, but I picked it up anyway. The paper was thick, the kind my mother liked to use for thank you notes and holiday cards. Inside was a 2-page letter written carefully, as if neatness might help it survive what it had to say. She did not deny anything. That was the first thing I noticed. There were no phrases about misunderstandings. No attempts to smooth the edges. She wrote that she had watched the signs for years and kept choosing quiet over truth because quiet felt manageable. She wrote that my father had always spoken first and with such certainty that eventually she began borrowing his certainty instead of testing it. She wrote that this did not excuse her, only described her. Then, near the end, she wrote a sentence I read twice. "You were telling us the truth long before anyone was willing to document it." I folded the pages back along their original creases and put them into the envelope again. Nora looked up from the stove. "Anything useful in there?" "Yes," I said after a moment, "but not urgent." That was the right word for it. Not urgent. For so much of my life, every message from home had carried urgency with it. Respond now. Explain now. Calm this now. Repair this now. Even apologies came wrapped in timing and pressure. This letter did not get to decide the pace. I set it in the drawer beside the refrigerator with takeout menus and spare batteries and things that could wait. Then I made tea. That became one of my habits over the next few weeks. Tea after work. Shoes by the door. Badge in a ceramic bowl on the entry table. Wrist exercises from physical therapy. A short walk around the block if the evening was clear. It was not a glamorous kind of healing. Mostly it looked like putting objects back where they belonged and learning that no one would move them to unsettle me. At the hospital, the committee's recommendations turned into actual protocol revisions. Private questioning guidelines were rewritten. Staff were reminded not to treat polished family narratives as neutral evidence. Security documentation was integrated more directly into trauma review when there were signs of coercion. It was procedural, maybe even dull from the outside, which made me trust it more. A month later, I gave a short training session to a new group of residents. I did not tell them everything. They did not need all of it. I told them this, Injuries speak, but systems have to know how to listen. I told them that the most controlled person in a room is not always the safest one to believe. I told them that embarrassment delays care more often than people admit. And I told them that when a patient changes their story after being separated from family, you should not treat that as inconsistency. You should treat it as data. Afterward, one of the residents stayed behind. She was young, maybe 26, still wearing that careful expression people have when they are trying to sound more certain than they feel. She said, quietly, "I think there's someone in my family who may be dealing with something similar." Not exactly, but close enough that I recognized parts of it. I did not ask for details. I only said, "Then start with what can be written down." She nodded as if that gave her something solid to stand on. Maybe it did. That was how the next story entered my life. Not as a dramatic twist, just as another person, in another hallway, trying to decide whether silence was still serving anyone. There are more people than most of us realize who live inside orderly-looking situations that make them doubt their own threshold. Once you learn to spot that, you start seeing it everywhere. By the beginning of spring, I signed a lease on a small apartment across town. It had narrow windows, plain cabinets, and a second-hand table that wobbled until I fixed it with a folded piece of cardboard under one leg. The first night there, I unpacked slowly. Plates in one cabinet, mugs in another. Scrubs hung in the closet by color more out of instinct than style. In the bathroom, I lined up my toothbrush, face wash, and hand cream on the shelf and felt an odd, quiet satisfaction in the spacing of it. No one interrupted. No one corrected the arrangement. No one came in later and changed it just enough for me to notice. When everything was put away, I swept the kitchen floor, though it did not really need sweeping, then opened a window and stood there with a cup of tea in both hands. There was traffic in the distance and the faint sound of someone laughing outside in the parking lot. A dog barked twice. A cabinet settled somewhere behind me with a soft wooden click. That was all. No speech came to me in that moment. No big lesson. Just a settled feeling I had not known how to imagine before. Peace, I learned, is very often administrative at first. A room key that is only yours. A bank card that stays where you left it. A phone that rings and does not frighten you. A calendar with your own handwriting on it. A home where the story does not keep changing after dark. So that is where I'll leave this. If you stayed with me to the end, thank you. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy calm, real stories like this one. And in the comments, tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always like seeing where everyone is listening from. 2 popular stories will appear next, and I think you may want to hear those too.